Here she is! My scrap sweater is finished. The story behind this sweater is that the other day I posted a little YouTube short about how I screwed it up and made it way too big, but managed to save it with some elastic thread. And I did not expect that video to get the positive response that it did. Thank you for appreciating my MacGyver approach to knitting. I've never had so many positive comments on a video before. Among the comments were lots of requests for a pattern or tutorial, and that was the original idea before I royally messed up the gauge. I wanted to do right by you all, but I wasn't sure how to proceed with a pattern whose instructions start out with, okay, first make a sweater that doesn't fit. So instead of a pattern, I'm gonna do like a sweater tour and talk about some of the ideas behind my yarn choice and the stitches I used, so that you'll be able to make a sweater like this by the end of the video. So big picture, it's a top-down raglan, meaning I cast on in the round, knit the ribbing, and then increased at 4 points to grow all parts of the sweater at the same time. I referenced this free, simple top-down raglan pattern from Yarnspirations, and here's where I think it went wrong. I wanted a wide neck off-the-shoulder sweater, and I thought I could get away with basically making this sweater with half of the yoke cut off. But I obviously started a bit too far down, and I didn't appreciate how the slouchiness of the sweater would mean that it would be quite big with the shoulders missing, basically. So that's the trick. If you really want to make this sweater, elastic hack and all, find a top-down raglan pattern you like, but start it with the stitch count from about halfway down the yoke. Then crochet elastic tightly across the top edge. In some patterns, it might not be so clear what the stitch count is, but considering that you know the starting stitch count and that you're increasing by 8 stitches every other round, you can figure it out with a little math. Now, if you're curious about how I made the sweater look so random while still looking cohesive and giving it this particular character, it's all about contrast. And I thought about it in terms of texture and color. To keep the color contrast high between the black and the rest of the colors, I used the red as the main color and made sure that all the scraps matched it in terms of tone and saturation. So this red is a very neutral to slightly warm shade, and here's an example of a red that was too cool toned, even though it was also a low saturation, dusty red color. So this is a good example of like right tone, wrong undertone. Meanwhile, here's a neutral to warm red that was too saturated. It would have competed with the contrast of the black, so right undertone, wrong tone or saturation level. So since I stuck to neutrals and warm neutrals in the same kind of pale dusty tone, I was able to mix a lot of different scraps without it looking too busy. That brings me to texture. I took the same approach here, making sure to consistently swap between one texture of very smooth, sort of basic yarn, and fluffy kind of teddy bear texture yarns. And in sticking to only 2 textures, I was able again to highlight the contrast between the two without the sweater getting too confused looking. So that's just a little bit of the method behind my madness, and some principles you can follow if you want to do a similar scrap sweater. Finally, let's zoom in and talk about the actual stitch patterns I used. They're all beginner friendly, and most of it is stockinette, so just knitting stitches in the round. The meshy stitch is actually just the basic drop stitch, and I'll link to a more in-depth tutorial that I just made, but basically you just wrap the needle twice before you knit a stitch. And then on the next round you drop those wraps and knit the stitch. Super easy. When I felt like it, I would put a stripe of some seed stitch in there, alternating knits and purls. And I'd purl around with black yarn to get these rustic-looking seams every once in a while. The stitch patterns were definitely a lot less intentional than my yarn choices were. No thoughts, just vibes. However, I did end the body and sleeves with a few rows of garter stitch just to prevent curled edges and give the piece some visual weight. So, armed with all of that info, you too can make a poorly fitting scrap sweater that needs elastic to survive. If you are new to my channel, I am so happy that you're here and that you came for this project. Like if screwing up and fixing sweaters is making this many people happy, I'm going to keep messing up sweaters for you, so please stick around because there's plenty more mistakes to come. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye!